Hello, Namaskar. This is First Post and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. New week, new controversy in Indian politics. This one involves a small island that is part of Sri Lankan territory now. How did Colombo get it though? And why is the BJP blaming the Congress and the DMK for it? We'll explain. Meanwhile, China has taken claim on 30 territories in Arunachal Pradesh in India with the latest provocation in its map war. The US President has written a letter to the Pakistani Prime Minister. What does it say and what's the larger message? The Indian Navy has rescued 23 Pakistani sailors. We bring you the story of the daring operation. Why did Erdogan lose local polls in Turkey and why is it such a big deal? How the US giving bombs to Israel is the latest example of its hypocrisy. Why Somalia is on the verge of breaking up. How Peru has been rocked by what's being called a Rolex scandal. Why the US is debating over the humble potato. Is it a vegetable or a grain? And where is spring? Why are we moving straight from winter to summer? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Bangladesh's Prime Minister slams the opposition over its Boycott India campaign. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina asks the campaigners why they're still wearing Indian saris and eating Indian spices. Under Prime Minister Hasina, Dhaka has maintained good ties with New Delhi. In India, relief for the opposition Congress party, the Income Tax Department tells the Supreme Court there will be no action against the party till after the election. The Congress is facing huge fines over tax irregularities. Rahul Gandhi had claimed that they have no money to contest the election. The mysterious Havana syndrome linked to Russia. It was first reported in 2016 when many US diplomats in Cuba's capital fell ill. A report claims these officials may have been targeted by Russian sonic weaponry. Moscow has dismissed these allegations as quote-unquote groundless. Pakistan cricket split wide open. Its cricket board releases a statement claiming sacked captain Shahid Afridi backs his replacement Babar Azam. But Afridi, who was captain for just 4 months, denies making any such statement. And Germany legalizes recreational cannabis, becoming the largest country in the European Union to do so. All adults can now carry 25 grams of dried cannabis and grow up to 3 marijuana plants at home. We're counting down to India's general elections. There's less than 20 days left now, so the political battle is peaking and the new flashpoint is foreign policy, which by the way is pretty rare. Usually domestic issues dominate Indian elections and most elections in fact, things like jobs and inflation. So where has foreign policy come from? It all started with a statement by the Prime Minister, the Indian Prime Minister. Look at what it says and I'm quoting, "Eye-opening and startling new facts reveal how Congress callously gave away Katchatheevu." A couple of questions here. What is Katchatheevu? And B, what are these new facts that he's talking about? Now, Katchatheevu is an island between India and Sri Lanka. It's around 1.6 kilometers long and 300 meters wide, so a pretty small stretch of land. If you travel 30 kilometers north, you will reach India, the city of Rameshwaram in India. If you travel 60 kilometers south, you will reach mainland Sri Lanka, the city of Jaffna. And who lives on this island? No one. There is no drinking water on the island, so no one lives there. The only structure is a church. Now, for a long time, this island was disputed. India said it belongs to us. Sri Lanka said, no, it's ours. But in 1974, both countries signed a deal. India took back its claims over Katchatheevu. So Sri Lanka got the island. In 1974, a Congress government was in power in India. Indira Gandhi was Prime Minister. So Prime Minister Modi now says that the Congress party gave away this island and that India's unity was compromised. Which brings us to the second question. What's the new information he's talking about? Well, it's not technically new. Most of it was already well documented. But Prime Minister Modi's party, the BJP, filed an RTI on this matter. a right to information petition. They filed it, and that's how Katchatheevu was thrust into the news again. Today, the Foreign Minister of India also waded in. He linked the 1974 deal to the repeated arrest of Indian fishermen near Sri Lanka. He also blamed two parties for it, the Congress and the DMK. The DMK is the party which rules the state of Tamil Nadu.
Whether it was Pandit Nehru or whether it was Indira Gandhi, this very dismissive attitude, this little rock, this small island of no importance, this was the historic Congress attitude towards Katchatheevu. Now, again, please don't think it's an individual view. This was actually, in a way, had seeped into the party thinking. The Congress and the DMK have approached this matter as though they have no responsibility for it. As though the situation is for central government, today's central government, for them to resolve. There is no history to this. This has just happened. They are the people who are taking up the cause. That is the way they would like to project it.
And what's the Tamil connect here? Again, we go back to history. Katchatheevu was once controlled by the Jaffna kingdom, basically by Sri Lankans. But in the 17th century, it changed hands. First, it went to the rulers of Ramanad. It's a city in Tamil Nadu. Then, it was included in the Madras presidency. So, Tamil Nadu has a stake here. In fact, successive state governments have rejected the 1974 deal, including the current DMK one. They've rejected this deal. But the BJP says, no point complaining now, you're equally to blame. They say the Congress and the DMK together gave away Katchatheevu. But both parties reject this. Let me show you the Congress response now, and I'm quoting again. You have suddenly woken up to the issues of territorial integrity and national security in your 10th year of misrule. Perhaps elections are the trigger. Your desperation is palpable. So the Congress is having none of it. But their decision in 1974 was controversial. There's no denying that, because the island may have been empty, but it would have expanded India's waters. It would have given our fishermen more areas to fish in. Of course, we have the benefit of hindsight. The government in 1974 did not have that. Their argument was quite simple. If you give up the island, Sri Lanka will appreciate it. Maybe it could deepen bilateral ties. So the Congress leaders of that time thought, small price to pay. But 5 decades later, it's questionable. Our relationship with Colombo is a shaky one. Plus, our fishermen are running out of places to fish. So in hindsight, maybe it was a big prize. But let's not just focus on the past. Let's also look at the future. What will be the impact of this Katchatheevu controversy? There's a domestic and foreign impact. Domestically, it could influence voters, especially Tamil voters. Fisher folk make up a sizable chunk of Tamil Nadu's population. For them, Katchatheevu is very important. There's an emotional and financial connect. And so the BJP is tapping into it. They don't have a foothold in Tamil Nadu. Only 4 out of the 234 state lawmakers belong to the BJP, only 4. Secondly, the foreign impact. Sri Lanka will not like this talk about Katchatheevu. After all, it's legally their land now. Look at this article on Sri Lanka's foreign ministry website. The headline should sum it up. Katchatheevu is ours, clean as a whistle. So Colombo won't be happy about this. Such statements also give clues about government policy. What we can expect in the future. India shares a border with 9 countries, land borders with 7 countries, maritime borders with 2 others. Out of these, 4 borders have been fully defined. Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar and Bhutan, 4 borders. In fact, the Bangladesh border was resolved only in the last decade, not without drama though. New Delhi and Dhaka both claimed an island in the Bay of Bengal, the New Moor Island. India had sent soldiers there to claim it, but diplomacy and force could not settle the dispute, so nature did. The rising seas swallowed the island in 2010, and no island, no dispute. But elsewhere, trouble remains. Like in the Kalapani area with Nepal. It's because of how vast and diverse the Indian subcontinent was. Dynasties and empires did not have exact boundaries. So historic claims are hard to prove, which brings us to the question, what happens next? Well, no policy is beyond criticism, and the same applies to the 1974 India-Sri Lanka deal. If you don't like it, you can question it. Plus, it doesn't change the ground reality. India's Attorney General in 2014 summed it up best. If you want Katchatheevu back, you will have to go to war to get it back. And speaking of disputed borders, India's biggest headache is China. It is aggressive and expansionist, and it does not respect the law. China has kicked off another map war with India. It has released a new list of places. These are Indian territories, but Beijing has given them Chinese names. This list has 30 names in all. All these places are in Arunachal Pradesh. There are 11 residential areas, 12 mountains, 4 rivers, 1 lake, 1 mountain pass and 1 piece of land. That is China's list. All of these places belong to India, but China is now calling them by Mandarin names. It's an old trick of theirs. Whenever China wants to stake claim on Indian territory, they just give it a Chinese name. It's absurd. If we start calling Hong Kong Hanumangarh, it will not become Indian. But that's what China does. Beijing started releasing such lists in 2017. This is their 4th list. They say Arunachal Pradesh belongs to China. This is an Indian state in the northeast. China calls it Jiangnan. The international community does not recognize the Chinese claim, but China does not care. It keeps releasing these lists. It keeps adding more names. The first list, released in 2017, had just 6 names. The second one came in 2021. It had 15 Indian territories with Chinese names. The third one came in 2023. It had 11 names. And now in 2024, China has released the 4th list with 30 names. What does this tell you? China is both repeating and expanding its claims, and its tone is becoming sharper. Listen to this.
Jiangnan has been China's territory since ancient times. This is an undeniable fact. Where does the so-called Arunachal Pradesh come from?
That was a spokesperson from China's defense ministry. He's asking, where does Arunachal Pradesh come from? Typical wolf warrior, full of rhetoric with no basis in fact. These expanding claims and sharpening tone make one thing clear though. They show that China is agitated. It is upset with India's improving. It does not like New Delhi's progress, and the progress has been significant. Last year, India launched 118 border projects. More than half of them were in Arunachal Pradesh and Ladakh. Now, these are 2 critical areas along the India-China border, Arunachal Pradesh and Ladakh, also among the most hotly contested regions. India is firming up its position in both these areas, and that has riled up the Chinese. One project in particular has raised eyebrows in Beijing. This is the Sela Tunnel. It was inaugurated by Prime Minister Modi himself last month. This tunnel connects Arunachal Pradesh with Assam. Assam is a neighboring state in the northeast. The tunnel connects Arunachal Pradesh with Assam. And when this tunnel was opened, China threw a fit.
The China-India border issue remains unresolved. India has no right to unilaterally develop Jiangnan, known as South Tibet in English, which belongs to China.
Beijing protested the Prime Minister's visit. It said the Indian Prime Minister had no business travelling to Arunachal Pradesh, let alone inaugurating a project. And India responded in kind.
This is not a new issue. China has laid claim. It has expanded its claim. The claims were ludicrous to begin with. They remain ludicrous today.
The claims are ludicrous. New Delhi replied to China in the same tone. It has called China's claims absurd and baseless. India has also commented on the latest list. It says China's attempt to assign invented names does not alter the reality. Arunachal Pradesh remains an integral part of India, and the world supports India's position. A few days ago, this is what the United States said.
The United States recognizes Arunachal Pradesh as Indian territory, and we strongly oppose any unilateral attempts to advance territorial claims by incursions or encroachments, military or civilian, across the line of actual control.
China slammed the US for this. It said India and China can resolve their differences themselves. That's also New Delhi's position, by the way. It wants to resolve differences bilaterally and peacefully. But there's a problem. China is not serious about this. It has been provoking India and salami slicing to usurp Indian land. In 2020, Chinese troops attacked in Ladakh. They targeted Indian soldiers. Since then, commanders from both sides have been meeting. They've had 21 rounds of talks in 4 years. To what end? India keeps pushing for complete disengagement. China keeps raising tensions with more deployments, more provocations, and more lists of Indian villages with Chinese names. These are not the actions of a neighbor seeking peace. These are the traits of a devious and deceptive player. India's best bet is to stay the course, try to avoid conflict while aggressively preparing for it. And staying in the neighborhood, Pakistan's Prime Minister got a letter last week, a pretty important one, because the sender was US President Joe Biden. We'll tell you what he wrote. But even if you ignore the content, this letter is important. And why is that? Because it signals a change in US policy. Let me show you a timeline. Joe Biden took office in 2021. Imran Khan was Pakistan's Prime Minister back then, but he never got a phone call. No invite, no talks. It was like Imran Khan did not exist for Joe Biden. Then in 2022, Imran Khan was ousted. Shehbaz Sharif took charge as Prime Minister. Again, same treatment. No message, no invite, no talks. So this letter is the first contact between Biden and Pakistan's Prime Minister. It's taken more than 1,100 days. The question is, will it lead to something bigger? Let's look at what Biden wrote. The enduring partnership between our nations remains critical to ensuring the security of our people and people around the world. And the United States will continue to stand with Pakistan to tackle the most pressing global and regional challenges of our time. So Biden is offering support to Pakistan, and Shehbaz Sharif needs that support. He leads a very weak coalition government in Islamabad. He was elected in a widely rigged election. So legitimacy is important for him. Many in Biden's party wanted the president to withhold it. They said, do not recognize Sharif's government. But Biden has ignored them. He's promising to forge a quote-unquote strong partnership with Pakistan. Is he backing those words with action, though? It looks like it. Last month, a team from the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, visited Pakistan. They agreed to release funds to the government. How much? Almost $1.1 billion. And who plays a dominant role at the IMF? The United States of America. In fact, more loans are on the cards. Shehbaz Sharif wants another IMF bailout. His finance minister expects a deal by the end of this year. So the US-Pakistan relationship is on the mend. The only question is, why? The US had effectively shut out Pakistan, and for once their policy made sense. Islamabad had consistently played a double game on terrorism. So the US decided, we've had enough. Plus, in 2021, they pulled out of Afghanistan. So Washington did not need a staging ground in South Asia. They had no direct stake there. What changed between then and now? A couple of things. Reports say Pakistan helped Ukraine's war effort against Russia, even shipped weapons to Kiev. That was a big tick in Biden's book. Secondly, Afghanistan is becoming a threat again. Washington genuinely hoped the Taliban had changed. Biden bet on them to control terrorism, to crack down on Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. Well, news flash, it did not work. The Islamic State is using Afghanistan as their base. They've attacked Russia, Iran, Turkey and Pakistan. That's 4 nations in 3 months, attacked by the ISIS. Many experts think the US could be next. Is that why Joe Biden is reaching out to Pakistan to use Islamabad to contain the terrorists? They say there is, quote-unquote, tremendous potential for a partnership.
I literally talked to the Chief of the Army Staff from Pakistan this morning in a regular scheduled call. They have tremendous insight into the violent extremist organizations inside of Afghanistan, and I think there is tremendous opportunity to be able to partner with Pakistan on that.
What will that partnership look like, though? Will it be strictly military, or will it be wide-ranging? Biden's letter offers some clues on that. For starters, who writes a letter? A phone call would have suggested more warmth, more personal investment, but a letter suggests the opposite. Biden wrote one for Bangladesh's Prime Minister too. No call, only letter. Another clue is the content, or rather the lack of it. Biden did not congratulate Shehbaz Sharif on becoming Prime Minister. It's common diplomatic courtesy. If you speak to a newly elected leader, you congratulate them. But Biden chose not to. So maybe he does have some reservations. For his sake and the world's, let's hope so. Because everyone remembers the last time Pakistan and America partnered on terrorism. No one wants a repeat of that. Our next story is about a bold rescue operation. The Indian Navy has done it again. Over the weekend, the Navy saved 23 Pakistani nationals. They were operating an Iranian fishing ship in the Arabian Sea. Their ship was attacked and hijacked by pirates. They sent out an SOS call. The Indian Navy responded, and after a 12-hour-long operation, they made the pirates surrender. And this is not a first. Since December last year, India has conducted some 18 rescue operations in the Arabian Sea. And the Indian Navy has saved many Pakistanis. Our next report tells you more about this latest daring operation.
It was a delicate and risky operation. But the Indian Navy saved these sailors with expert precision. This is how one of them thanked his rescuers.
इंडियन नेवी ने मुझे आज़ाद कर दिया, सोमालियों को निकाल दिया है। अभी मैं आज़ाद हूँ। इंडियन नेवी का शुक्रिया। इंडिया जिंदाबाद।
23 Pakistani nationals were among this crew. They were out fishing in the Arabian Sea when 9 armed pirates targeted them. They boarded the ship and took all the crew members hostage. When the Indian Navy came to know about the hijacking, 2 Indian warships were mobilized, the INS Sumedha and INS Trishul. They intercepted this hijacked vessel and after an intense 12-hour operation, the pirates were forced into surrender. Despite the complete breakdown in bilateral ties, the Indian Navy has not discriminated in offering assistance to Pakistani sailors in West Asia. Since December last year, the Indian Navy has accomplished several daring rescues, like this one. Last month, in the Gulf of Aden, dozens of crew members had nowhere to go when Houthis struck their ship. But soon, the Indian Navy dispatched a helicopter and a boat and saved 21 people.
While we were going, we sent a helicopter. The helicopter found the crew in the life raft. Then we use the helicopter and we pull up 8 people and then we send our boat because some people are very injured so they cannot come by helicopter, so we send 2 boats and we put them in the boat and brought them to the ship.
Until March, the Indian Navy had completed some 18 rescue missions and saved around 110 lives. Out of this, 65 were foreign nationals. This includes over 20 Pakistanis and the remaining 45 sailors were Indians. These missions were a part of Operation Sankalp. For over 100 days now, the Indian Navy has been patrolling the Indian Ocean region and its neighbourhood and engaging in a wide variety of maritime operations. Saving lives is just one part of it. Another important component is securing cargo. During Operation Sankalp, the Indian Navy has safely escorted 15 million tons of critical supplies like crude oil and fertilizer. These missions are complex and challenging, but the Indian Navy has demonstrated exceptional skills. The job is far from over. Last week, the Indian Navy stepped up its surveillance in the region. This comes amid escalating threats from the pirates. The Indian Navy says it has a responsibility to keep the Indian Ocean safe. The operation last week only reinforces the region's faith in India's naval expertise.
Vantage continues after a short break.
Hello and welcome to the brand new series Election Street Side. This will be a fun segment where we'll be focusing on food, but we'll be also talking about the politics. In fact, it's just few months for the general elections and we are here to gauge from the people exactly what they think about the coming up elections and also about their particular candidates. While taking a stroll in the streets of Chandni Chowk, one thing we cannot miss is Golgappas or the puchkas we say. This is Padam Chaat Corner here in Chandni Chowk. Perhaps this is one of those hidden gems a lot of people don't know about. Some people might know because this is a local eatery situated in the streets of the national capital. In fact, I found a family over here. I dare not disturb them while eating. In fact, the gentleman over there is still enjoying the bhalla and dahi golgappa and stuff. Sir, दही भल्ले का आप मज़ा लेता रहिए. एक चीज़ पूछना चाहूँगा, दिल्ली में और देश में चुनाव आने वाले हैं, बहुत कम समय रह गया है. क्या देखते हैं अभी की सिचुएशन के हिसाब से? क्या लगता है आपके मनपसंद
It was election night in Turkey and the big headline is this: President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has lost. Now, just to be clear, the Turkish president was not on the ballot, but it's still as embarrassing. Let me tell you why. The elections were held for Turkey's local bodies, a bit like the corporations and panchayats of India. Erdogan's party came in second. They got 35% of the votes. And who came first? Turkey's main opposition party called CHP. They won 37% of the votes. Out of 81 provinces, the opposition secured 36, a resounding and stunning victory. As the results came in, celebrations began. Tens of thousands of supporters hit the streets of Turkey. They danced and chanted slogans. Take a look at this. Experts are calling it a turning point, the biggest setback for Erdogan. And why is that? For starters, this has not happened in 2 decades. Erdogan came to power almost 21 years ago, and since then, his party has never been beaten. Never at the national level. But this time it happened. Erdogan's party lost. Secondly, there is a clear ideological divide here. Erdogan represents hardline Islamists. He has diluted Turkey's secularism. But the opposition CHP opposed this. They are bona fide secularists. So their victory has more than policy implications. It has cultural and ideological effects. And Erdogan realizes this. He has promised to introspect after the drubbing.
We will avoid being stubborn, acting against the national will and questioning the judgment of our nation, as we have done so far. We will take the necessary steps by analyzing the messages given by the nation at the ballot box most accurately and objectively, within the reason and in our inner conscience.
So Erdogan was the big loser. Now let me introduce the big winner. Ekrem İmamoğlu. He is a 53-year-old former businessman. Many think he could challenge Erdogan's rule. And their journeys are quite similar. Both men belong to the Black Sea region. They loved football and they both became mayors of Istanbul. İmamoğlu was elected mayor in 2019. It was a major embarrassment for President Erdogan, a bit like losing your ancestral home. So this time, he vowed to get him toppled. Erdogan himself led the campaign in Istanbul. And what happened? İmamoğlu secured more than 50% of the votes. He beat Erdogan's candidate by 1 million votes. Afterwards, he had this to say.
Emir verir, talimat verir bir kişi.
The nation itself gives the order and instructions, not just one person. Officials receive instructions from the nation. The period of one-man rule is over as of today. It is done. The republic and democracy are going full speed ahead from now on.
Cumhuriyet.
If you follow Turkey, all this may sound strange. They had presidential elections only last year and Erdogan won those easily. So what has changed in 9 months? Broadly speaking, just one thing, the economy. Turkish inflation reached 67% in February. It was a 15-month high. Now you may ask, wasn't inflation high last year during the presidential election? Well, it was. But back then, Erdogan was using his unorthodox economic policy. He stopped the central bank from hiking lending rates, so the effect of the inflation was not clear. But after the elections, he made a U-turn. He increased the interest rates to reduce inflation. Basically, Erdogan gave the bitter, decided to stay home. So the turnout was just 76%, the lowest since 2004. And these results have also exposed a divide. Erdogan's party is now limited to rural Turkey. All the big cities were won by the opposition, including the big three, Istanbul, Ankara and Izmir. Which brings us to the big picture. What does it mean for President Erdogan and his Islamist politics? Well, for him, it's a setback. His presidential term will end in 2028. Erdogan is widely expected to retire by then. These results will only push him further in that direction. As for his politics, the answer is more complicated. A hardline Islamist party made inroads this time. It's called YRP. They got 6% of all votes. And they gained 2.8 million voters. This party is now the third biggest in Turkey. And what are its policies? Anti-LGBTQ, anti-vaccines, anti-West, and anti-NATO. So this party is more Islamist than Erdogan. It tells you how dangerous such leaders are. They may eventually leave or retire, but their ideology of hate will linger. Our next story is the latest shining example of American hypocrisy. The Biden administration has given more bombs to Israel as they ask Israel to stop attacking Gaza. They're giving more military aid to one side and airdropping food aid to another, while making the right noises and saying the politically correct things, also hoping that both American Jews and American Muslims will vote for them. That's what it all boils down to. Joe Biden has never shared warm ties with Netanyahu, but when Hamas attacked Israel, Biden was firmly in Netanyahu's corner. As the war dragged on, the death toll in Gaza soared, more than 32,000 at last count, mostly women and children. So public sentiment shifted, and the US started putting pressure on Israel. Over the last few weeks, we've seen public disagreements and rebukes, some gaslighting, even private insults. Biden defined red lines for Israel. Netanyahu vowed to defy them. It was as if the US and Israel were heading for a breakup. But now it looks like they've made up. Washington is sending more arms to Israel. Reports say the aid package is worth $2.5 billion. It consists of bombs, including a controversial 900-kilo bomb, something that has been used in Gaza before. When dropped, this bomb can cause damage up to 1,000 feet, and the US is sending more of these. Not just that, it's also sending more fighter jets. Israel is already the largest recipient of American aid. It receives close to $4 billion every year, most of which is military aid, and it's only gone up since the war began. So more money and more weapons. While the US also pushes for a ceasefire, the Palestinian Authority has slammed Washington for this, and back home, Biden has bigger critics. First is the Democratic Party, his party. 75% of them disapprove of Israel's war. They want aid to be restricted. Then there's the American Arab community. They're accusing Biden of hypocrisy. Thousands are voting uncommitted in the Democratic primaries, meaning they may not vote for Biden. And this has been a Democratic voter base. So Biden is losing both lawmakers and voters. Plus, he's bickering with Netanyahu. Then why is he sending more weapons? Because of history and politics. Israel, you see, was founded in 1948. Minutes after its founding, America recognized Israel. And all US presidents have supported it since. So while Joe Biden may have a beef with Benjamin Netanyahu, he will not abandon Israel. It was the same with Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Pro-Israel, but anti-Netanyahu. The second reason why Biden is sending aid is that the US is worried about this war spilling over. They're worried about the Hezbollah, about the Houthis, about Iran wading into this conflict. And if that happens, Israel will be vulnerable. So Biden may have to back Netanyahu for now. But the people of Israel feel no such compulsion. They're protesting against their prime minister. On Sunday, thousands took to the streets. They called for Netanyahu's resignation.
Really shows that the Israeli public woke up. It is clear today, 6 months after the massacre of October 7th, that in order to win, we need new leadership. In order to bring back the hostages, we need new leadership. Israel cannot allow itself the continuation of Netanyahu's government and its coalition.
Israel was rocked by anti-government protests before the war. After October 7th, all of that stopped. The country was at war, so the people united. It looks like their patience has now run out.
It's all people in Israel that he will stop be Prime Minister and move and make some of them want election now. I want my father-in-law home now, so what, which way, it doesn't matter, just bring them back.
Netanyahu has refused to resign and rejected calls for early polls. He's working on the Rafah offensive. It's a city in southern Gaza. Netanyahu wants to storm it. He calls Rafah the last frontier for the Hamas. But 1.5 million Palestinians are also seeking refuge there. So it won't be an easy offensive. The US has already warned Israel. They've called it a red line. So Netanyahu faces pressure from both sides. He's losing support, both domestic and international. And Joe Biden is being called out by all sides for trying to run with the hare and hunt with the hounds. Our next story is from Africa, from Somalia in the northeast. Somalia's parliament amended the constitution on Saturday. They're changing the system, making it more democratic. The country will have direct elections for the first time since 1969, meaning it will be one person, one vote. And normally this would be seen as a good thing, a move in the right direction. But in Somalia, it has sparked a clash. One part of the country is not happy. The semi-autonomous region of Puntland. Puntland was not consulted, so the region now wants to sever ties, to break away from Somalia. It's a new headache for a country which already has one breakaway region and is also dealing with a terror insurgency. Here's our report.
Somalia is a nation in northeast Africa, in the Horn of Africa region. It is home to over 25 million people, and it suffers from low development. In 2022, it ranked dead last in the UN's Human Development Index, last among the 193 countries evaluated. Part of the reason for this is war. The country has been in a state of civil war since 1991, 33 years of civil war. One set of Somali people against the other. So, in this situation, the last thing you need is more internal strife. But that's exactly what has happened. One of Somalia's major regions, Puntland, has said that it'll sever ties with the capital, Mogadishu. This is Puntland, one of the 7 states of Somalia. It plans to withdraw its recognition of the federal government. Puntland isn't planning to secede, not yet anyway. But it says it won't recognize the federal government's authority. This is a unique situation, a partial secession. It's like Texas refusing to obey federal laws passed by the US Congress. Maybe we should use a less plausible example. Cornwall throwing off the English yoke. Or Uttar Pradesh refusing to accept New Delhi's mandate. Puntland's decision is something like that. Puntland says it still wants to be a part of Somalia, but it won't accept the latest amendments to the Somali constitution. 4 amendments were approved by Somalia's parliament on Saturday.
No MP objected, no MP abstained. Some 212 members unanimously voted for the amendments of the draft constitution. Therefore, it is approved.
On Saturday, Somalia decided to adopt a direct voting system. Since 1969, the voting system has been unique. It's based on the major clans in Somalia. Instead of every person getting a vote, clan elders and civil society leaders have been dictating terms. The new system would give everyone a voice, for the first time in more than half a century. Another major change is the president's role. Currently, Somalia's president is chosen by parliament. Now, Somalians will get to elect their president directly. No intermediaries. Direct elections. This may sound pretty standard. So, why is Puntland upset? Well, because the region wasn't consulted. No representative from Puntland was present at the discussions, so they could not put forward their point of view. However, this is because Puntland chose to boycott the talks. Mogadishu invited the region last year, but it refused because of political tensions. Now, if you don't go to the buffet after being invited, you can't claim you were starved. But that seems to be exactly what Puntland is doing. Puntland is crying foul and challenging federal authority. And it may just get away with it, because Somalia is in a delicate situation. There is a terror insurgency that is ongoing. It already has one breakaway region, Somaliland. So, Puntland may have the leverage to arm twist the government. Puntland refuses to accept the constitutional amendments until there is a referendum. So, Mogadishu may have to hold one, or find another way to bring Puntland on board. Because strife-torn Somalia cannot afford another conflict.
Now let's turn our attention to Peru. It's a nation in South America famous as the home of Machu Picchu, an Inca fortress city high up in the Andes, which is also a famous tourist spot. But Peru is also famous, or rather infamous, for another thing: political instability. Peru has seen 6 presidents in the last 8 years. It's a worse record than the UK Conservative Party. 4 of Peru's last 5 presidents did not even complete 2 years in office. All of them face legal troubles. And that trouble has now found the incumbent president, Dina Boluarte. This is what happened on Saturday night. That's the Peruvian police. About 20 members of Peru's highly complex investigations division, that's what they call themselves, they bashed a door in and entered the premises. Here's the unusual part. That was the president's house. That's right, the Peruvian police raided the sitting president's residence.
I have attended the prosecutor's office by appointing my lawyers and making myself available. So the dawn measures are arbitrary, disproportionate and abusive. This situation is serious and affects my family's rights, but above all, it affects the country's governance. Brothers and sisters, the president has been systematically attacked.
She claims that she was systematically attacked. Can you imagine this in any other country? The police breaking into a head of state's house. The presidential guard or secret service would have declared war, but in Peru, it looked like any other low-stakes raid. The police were followed by some people in suits. They were apparently officials from the public prosecutor's office, casually strolling in as though it was an everyday event. But this is Peru, so it may very well be the case. Because you see, the country is known for its combative law enforcement and its apparent dislike for presidents. Almost all presidents since 1985 have been prosecuted after leaving office. Many have fled the country after their term ended. Some are in jail, but all of them faced the heat once they left office, and this is true for the last president too. His name is Pedro Castillo. When he was in office, Dina Boluarte was the vice president. In 2022, Castillo was impeached. He then tried to pull off a self-coup. He tried to dissolve parliament and rule by decree, but the Peruvian police was not having it. They arrested him and threw him in jail, and that's where he has been ever since. And that's also when Dina Boluarte became president. Now, as you can imagine, she has not been too popular, being the former deputy of a corrupt leader who tried to instigate a coup. There were protests after Boluarte took charge, and she responded with force. She currently faces investigations over genocide and crimes against humanity. So as you can see, she's been under pressure from day one. The latest raid seems to be another attempt to get her to resign, but this time the case is less sensational. Not genocide or crimes against humanity. It's a good old-fashioned corruption scandal involving Rolex watches. A few weeks ago, a Peruvian news outlet conducted an investigation. They went through thousands of Boluarte's photos and came to the conclusion watches, 1-4. Now, Boluarte is not some entrepreneur. From 2007 till she became vice president, she worked in Peru's National Registry, a government record-keeping office. So for her to own 14 luxury watches does seem suspicious. Peruvian media is calling this the Rolex case. Boluarte claims she bought her watches over time, that she had been saving up since she was young. But let's see what the Peruvian police find. If the watches do lead to her downfall, she won't be the first. Watches have often been a bane for politicians around the world. In South Asia, the most famous example is Imran Khan, Pakistan's former prime minister. He was charged in what's known as the Tosha Khana case. The authorities say Imran Khan appropriated expensive items from the state treasury, gifts given by foreign dignitaries, which includes watches worth 2.5 crore rupees. Multiple Rolexes were involved. Last year, German Finance Minister Christian Lindner was under fire, again because of a Rolex. He was accused of trying to hide his Rolex and disguise his wealth. And it's not just politicians, by the way. Rulers of all kinds seem to have a weakness for Rolexes, including Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the former leader of ISIS. He was once photographed with a Rolex or Omega Seamaster. This was, of course, before his death by an airstrike in 2019. But as you can see, the rich and powerful across the world love their luxury watches. Boluarte is not really special in this regard. The difference is that she lives in Peru, where the police and the courts are not deferential to those in power. The latest raid shows that Boluarte is in serious trouble and time may be up on her presidency. Our next story is about potatoes. Potato is a culinary chameleon, simple yet versatile. Potato is the third most consumed food crop. 125 countries grow it. Over 1 billion people eat it every year. But what if I told you that the potato is not a vegetable? What if I told you it's a grain? Would you agree? The US is debating this question as we speak. A dietary advisory committee in America is considering changes to food groups. It wants to make starchy vegetables and grains interchangeable, which means your humble starchy potato could be a grain. Not everyone finds the idea appetizing. Our next report tells you why.
America is grappling with an identity crisis, not of its own, but of the humble potato. Americans love their spud. It's the country's most popular vegetable. An average American eats 120 pounds of potatoes each year. But is it even a vegetable? It's a debate with very deep roots. It started with the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. This committee has one main task. It gives recommendations to two bodies, the USDA, that's the US Department of Agriculture, and the HHS, the Health and Human Services. They take note of the recommendations, and this helps set up the dietary guidelines for Americans. It's issued every 5 years. Now, these dietary guidelines are not just any guidelines. They influence food policy. They influence federal nutrition guidelines. So, they're very important. Usually, they are more of the same. But this time, the advisory committee has a controversial recommendation. It's considering redefining food groups. It wants to make starchy vegetables and grains interchangeable. That would mean disaster for the potato. The potato is a starchy vegetable. If the two food groups become interchangeable, it could be considered as a grain. Of course, it may sound like a small change, but it has big repercussions. It would derail an entire supply chain from farm to table. It would lead to changes in tariffs, in sales, in how it's marketed, and finally on how it's sold. Basically, a lot of chaos. So some US senators are up in arms about it. They may not care about women's rights, but when it comes to the potato, it's all guns blazing. 14 senators have written a letter. It talked about the potato's nutritional benefits, its physical characteristics, and its scientific classification. Essentially, they made the case for the potato to be considered a vegetable. But this isn't the first time the US has waged a war over potatoes. The last one was in 2011. The US Department of Agriculture proposed a limit on starchy vegetables. They wanted to limit it to 2 servings per week in schools. The potato industry hit back. It was backed by senators, mostly from potato-growing states. So the USDA took it back. This time may not be much different. And the potato isn't the only one courting controversy. Take the tomato, for example. At least one person we all know is always ready to remind us that it's a fruit. But the US Supreme Court considers it a vegetable. In the 1880s, the US Congress passed a tariff act. It imposed a 10% tax on vegetables. So some merchants decided to pass tomatoes as fruits. The case went to the Supreme Court, and it ruled that tomatoes should be classified as vegetables. It has happened in India too over the sale of garlic. It was sold in both vegetable and spice markets. The Rajasthan High Court asked the government whether it was a spice or a vegetable, because if it was sold in a spice market, it would have to be taxed like that. So it's not the potato that's causing all the controversy. Classification of food groups have long been a flashpoint, and it's likely to remain so in the future. The humble tuber may divide opinions, but worry not, it won't make your French fry any less tasty.
Our last story tonight is about spring. It is seen as a time of transition. When the sun comes back to life and flowers bloom, birds chirp and picnic baskets come out. Spring is a season of welcome change after hard winter months. But for the past few years, it is undergoing a change of its own. Spring is not springing quite the way we want it to. Because the season of love is behaving like a love-struck teenager, it is both hasty and unpredictable. Year on year, spring is arriving much earlier and it is getting hotter. Entire nations feel like they've leapfrogged spring and moved to summer. Now, if you're a silver lining person, this may sound like good news. After all, trees wake up sooner and swimming lessons go on for longer. But the bigger picture is concerning. Changing spring unleashes a cascade of problems. It affects everything, from our health to the environment. And we will discuss all of this. But first, let's answer a basic question. When is spring supposed to start? For the ease of record keeping, March 1st is considered the first day of spring. The season is believed to go on till the end of May, the spring season, March to May. But the reality is more complicated. Spring does not arrive on the same day every year. In the Northern Hemisphere, it falls somewhere between 19th and 21st of March. That is the expectation. But thanks to climate change, our planet is warming rapidly, and this is scrambling the seasons. Over the past 7 decades, the timing of seasons has been changing, both in length and complexity. Now, all the seasons are out of whack. Winters are getting shorter and milder. So unusually warm days of winter are actually spring, which means spring is arriving earlier. Every decade, spring advances by 2.8 days in the Northern Hemisphere. This may not sound like much, but today spring is unfurling weeks ahead of the norm. And what's supposed to be spring is quickly becoming the new summer. For instance, in India, spring is disappearing completely. Study after study says this. In many parts, there is an abrupt transition between winter and the scorching heat of April. At least 9 regions are suffering a 2-degree jump in temperatures between January and February. In the US, green is taking the place of white. This winter, the nation's snow cover was at its lowest on record. And in several cities, spring arrived 32 days before the due date, meaning summer will arrive earlier as well. And this is happening the world over. In the past 60 years, summer has increased by 17 days on average across the globe. If this goes on, summer weather could take up half a year by the end of the century, and this is scary. With spring slowly going missing, heat waves could grow longer. Mosquito-borne illnesses could become more widespread. Agriculture will be affected. A short-lived spring can be disastrous for crops. So putting food on the table could be tougher. Plus, spring is not just a transition between seasons, it is a transition period for humans as well. Our body clocks change with changing seasons. As we move steadily towards summer, humans tend to reduce their duration of sleep. An abrupt shift from winter to summer can shock the system. A sudden lack of sleep can cause health problems. Spring also affects your mood and your life choices, believe it or not. Though any day is just as good to make positive changes, spring is often seen as a perfect time to make lasting ones. To declutter a wardrobe, not lasting, or embrace exercising. It is basic human psychology. A missing spring could be a missed opportunity. So my point is quite simple. Climate change is not just a statistic anymore. It is a lived experience. It affects every part of our life. And if this continues, spring might just go out of season. Vantage continues after a short break.
welcome to the brand new series Election Street Side. This will be a fun segment where we'll be focusing on food, but we'll be also talking about the politics. In fact, it's just few months for the general elections, and we are here to gauge from the people exactly what they think about the coming up elections and also about their particular candidates. While taking a stroll in the streets of Chandni Chowk, one thing we cannot miss is Golgappas or the Puchkas we say. This is Padam Chaat Corner here in Chandni Chowk. Perhaps this is one of those hidden gems a lot of people don't know about. Some people might know because this is a local eatery situated in the streets of the national capital. In fact, I found a family over here. I dare not disturb them while eating. In fact, the gentleman over there is still enjoying the bhalla and dahi golgappa and stuff. Sir, dahi bhalle ka aap maza leta rahiye. Ek cheez पूछना चाहूँगा.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Belgium, residents combine celebrations of Iftar and Easter by sharing a meal on a 2-kilometer-long table. In Iraq, citizens march and dance to mark the ancient Assyrian New Year. And in Syria, the call to prayer echoed through Aleppo's historic Umayyad Mosque for the first time in 12 years. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1935, the Reserve Bank of India was founded. It was in response to economic troubles after the First World War. India was the first British colony to have its own central bank. After partition, the RBI even served as the Central Bank of Pakistan until 1948. The bank was later nationalized in 1949. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
وعشيا